Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 81st episode of Kouryer Podcast. Today, I'm joined with a very special guest. We have Mr. Ali Bahmani as our guest. He's a origami instructor and also artist, which I never had an origami instructor and artist in the show, so this is why it's kind of exciting for me because it's also something that I've been excited and interested in for a long time. Well, Mr. Ali Bahmani is a UX lead at Cafebazaar Studio, host of Origami Talk podcast, and most importantly, of course, as I said, this is my third time I'm saying this. He's an origami designer and educator from Tehran, Iran. And before we move on to the first question, I need to say a little message to my dear Farsi speaking listeners. سلام و درود به تمام شنوندگان فارسی زبان عزیز پادکست کوریر. فقط خواستم این بهتون بگم که من یادم نرفته که خب آدینس به قولن شنوندگان فارسی زبانم میدونم. حالا آقای علی بهمنی هم خب از تهران باشون در تماس هستم، خودشون هم تسلط کامل به زبان فارسی دارن، ولی خب بر اساس حال تشخیص ایشون چون قبلا مصاحبه به فارسی و پادکست داشتن و به انگلیسی نداشتن، تصمیم گرفتیم که خب انگلیسی باشه بیشتر به نفعشونه و به دردشون میخوره، بیشتر میتونن در تماس باشن با فالوورهاشون و کسی که دنبالشون میکنن. ولی امیدوارن حالا هوپفولی به قولن در آینده بتونیم باز محتوای فارسی زبان باشون در آینده اگه بشه باز ضبط کنیم در باره هیت خود اوریگامی. و اینکه همین در قسمت بعدی باز باهاتون دا مهمان فارسی زبان دیگه در اختیار هستیم. و and cut with that out of the way, let's move on to the first question. All right, so first things first, give us a little introduction on how we got into visual arts and origami and basically the whole world of the origamis.
Right. Yeah. First of all, thank you for inviting me to your podcast, Ramtin, and also hello to everybody who's listening to this episode. Well, how did I ended up into the arts world? Well, so I studied math and physics in the high school, and before going to the university, I always was very interested into drawings and arts and art activities, but I never had the chance. And then later on, when I went to university to study applied mathematics, then I had more time to get to spend more time to what I like. And also I met friends from the arts faculty and arts school of the University of the Tehran, and also I had time to learn about the history of the graphic design, history of the art on my own. So I would say my interest in the graphic design was and photography was what led me into the art world or artistic side. And on the other hand, encountering origami was like professionally encountering origami was when I was 20 years old. But the first time I encountered origami was when I was 4 or 5 years old in Japan, because my family were living in Japan. My father was studying virology in Sapporo in Hokkaido University, and I went to the kindergarten with the Japanese children. And as every children is being exposed to the origami, I also learned origami, simple origamis, recreational origami, nothing serious, cranes, boats, hats. Um, and that was my first encounter. But then later on in the university, I realized that the origami world is much more broader than what I had imagined. And I also started searching it on the internet, and that was my intro into the world, into the professional world of the origami. And I started folding. I started getting in touch with the other artists. I started designing, and basically, the origami became the perfect combination of arts and science that I that could that could give me and also feed my passion that was both into the scientific side, rational side, and also the artistic side.
That's pretty interesting. There's something that's kind of bubbling on my mind that I need to ask you. For someone who has had the experiences like you had, um, considering you're from someone who's kind of from mathematical side and perspectives that you kind of got exposed. I mean, of course, you said you already when you were in kindergarten you were exposed to origami and arts and stuff like that. But have you ever, like, throughout this past years, been also exposed to or saw or had an interest in generative programming art that has been, like, done with programs? And just how about those, that type of subject? Has it ever occurred to you to do anything with that?
Yeah, right. So, yeah, exactly. The generative art is not only in also origami, but also in the graphic design in general was one of the interests that I had. But unfortunately, I always wished to be able to have the coding and algorithmic knowledge to code. So I always admired and liked the generative art by looking at it, but I never had the chance to produce or be the one who cooks these kind of generative arts, at least in the digital format. But that passion translated somehow into what I do. So in origami, the fractal origami and self-similar origami and generative patterns are one of the topics that I'm really am much interested about. And if you also look at my origami designs, you might be able to also consider them as a couple of them as generative patterns. So I would say yes to your question, and also that's one of my uh, interests and subjects that I'm really is interested about.
All right, awesome. And well, you kind of already explained about your background on how you got into origami, but just this is kind of like a different question. Were you originally decided to study, like, math and all of that, or before you had any thoughts of, like, maybe you want to pursue art or anything like that when you were into your teen years? Like, how did you had any change of thoughts when you were younger?
Right. So in the high school, we were all exposed to you have to become engineer. You have to become engineer, like civil engineer, mechanical engineer, electronic, electric engineers. So whatever the high school and the system advertises for you, that becomes somehow your reality to go to university. And the first, so I somehow rejected that, and to be honest, I refused to participate in my first year of concours, which is the national exam for everybody who wants to go to the university in Iran. um, like I just showed up in the exam and slept during the exam so that I can get out of the exam. So this was the first year because I didn't want this. Instead, what I was doing while I was in the pre-university year, I went to a caricature class. There was this famous Golaga magazine, which they had an office, and they also had these classes and workshops on caricature and also in the history of the caricatures. So I attended that. I also self-studied Italian. And so basically, I was doing whatever I thought it is interesting to do, uh, to not do what I am supposed to do, and studying for the exams. And when the first year passed, I had more time to think about what I would like, and that was when I found a friend who was studying pure math in the PhD program, and he when we talked, he showed me that this image of math being scary is not true, and rather it is just like music, and it's just it has so connection to arts that you might wonder how this is even possible. So that was my introduction to the math. And so what I wanted to do, so when I was choosing the major in the university, the only two major that I wrote down in my in the form was mathematics and also architecture. So I didn't end up being accepted in the architecture, so the next option was mathematics. And then when I went to the university to study math, This was like a very happy moment. But later on, I realized that universities in Iran might not be as interesting as one might imagine, and that was a total. That was actually a total disappointment years later. So, uh, yeah, that's the story.
All right, there's a couple of things that was pretty interesting about your story. Is first, for people who don't know who are listening, yes, there's kind of like this brutal exam system in Iran called like it's called concours, as also Mr. Bahmani said and mentioned that yeah, it's kind of pretty brutal. It's literally the same system as South Korean school system because I also heard like from my some of my South Korean friends. I also researched it online that they also have the pretty similar system in their education system. There, it's extremely taxing on the mental health of the students, and yeah. And fun fact, just this is like the really rare news that actually happened like a couple of weeks ago. That it happened to be that the this year's concours got leaked the day that it happened, and in a record-breaking statistics, more than 500 students got math over 80% score, which is like never happened before. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, usually
Yeah,
systems like this just breeds. It's not based on meritocracy. It's just wrong. Let's just leave it at that. All right. And all right. So
yeah, that's
from
crazy.
yeah, to leave that crazy subject, let's move on to the next subject, which is definitely not crazy. And is what is your main branch of design that you're focusing on? And tell us about your experience from the start of it until now. What I mean by that is, of course, we already know that you're an origami designer and educator, but as a lot of people might not know, but origami has a lot of sub branches and fields, different fields that it has. So, what field of origami right now are you active in, and do you professionalize in?
Right. That's a great question. So origami, for those who don't know, can be categorized in different terms. So one of the categorization is that there's this technique and also style of representative. So if you fold, usually with one paper, a tree or an animal or an object that is a representation of something in the real world, that is called representative origami. So crane, like hats, boats, all of those are not only representative but also a traditional, meaning that it is not known who's the designer is, and it's too old, and are usually old designs, or at least the designer is unknown. So that's one topic. Another one is which is geometrical. It is modular origami, and it refers to the a technique of the origami that uses separate sheets, multiple sheets, in order to create a single origami. Which I also have one example, like couple of examples in here. So this one, I guess this one uses like 12, if I'm not wrong, or 10 different pieces of paper to create something like this. You don't need glue, you don't need to cut, you just create or design the locking mechanism in order to create something like that. Or this one, folded out of the banknotes, is used. This one, you need 30 pieces of paper to create something like this. So this is modular origami. This one I also like the geometry because this is called icosahedron in mathematics. It has like 20 faces of what do you call it? Like triangles. And so these origamis are modular, and they are usually like in shape of 3D origamis, but it doesn't have to be 3D, it could be flat also. And the third category is tessellations, and it refers to the patterns, and it refers to the type of the origami that usually has a single motif that repeats itself, and you can like expand it as much as you fold it, so you don't have any end. You basically tile the pattern in a surface, and that's also another category of the origami techniques. So usually, what I would like to do is the geometry, but not the 3D, not the modular, but the single sheet geometric origamis. So that's the category that I'm interested about. But I also very much enjoy folding other people's geometric origami. So in terms of folding, in terms of reproducing other people's work and artwork, I'm interested in different in all the techniques. But when it comes to designing, when it comes to what I am much more focused in my designs, they are like the patterns, geometric patterns, and tessellations.
All right, and of course, speaking of like geometric design, I think like if anyone that is listening to the podcast, and by the way, sorry to audio listeners, if you want to see the stuff we just talked about, you can check the YouTube channel of the podcast to see the video version, which we discussing the shapes, on camera. And all right, let's move on to the point I was talking about. Also, for anyone who also checks your Instagram page, which of course I'm going to leave it in the captions as well for ease of access, you have highlights called My Designs, and there's a lot of like geometric designs in there as well. Um, is there any of them right now, or were the ones you showed were part of them?
Yeah, to show into the camera, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, the ones
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
showed. All right.
yeah. If so, this is. I'm not sure if this one is available in the. So in a month, I'm gonna participate in an exhibition called Pattern Architecture, which is the patterns, which is dedicated to the patterns. So this is one of the pieces that might be also in the exhibition. So this one, the interesting thing about this series is these series is called Patterns and Shadows, because depending on which angle the light meets the surface, you might see different patterns. So if I like rotate it 90-degree, it gives you a different feeling than what you might see in uh, uh, than the first. It also has some degree of freedom, so you can push it and see. It also gives you a stair-ish kind of an effect. There's also with the same concept, but with different grid. It is a polar grid. You might have also been able to see this one, and I also have designs which are pentagonal, which I don't have any of them here. So one of the things that I did is that I used pentagonal paper rather than square paper. So um, if you search in the YouTube Bahmani Sakura Star, you would see a couple of tutorials from uh, uh, origami YouTubers, very good teachers that are teaching my designs, which are based on pentagon. This is also another one in the series of patterns and shadows. So there are a couple of designs here, which I think gives you the idea what I'm talking about. So again, most of these also have some degree of freedom that you can open and close, which is quite interesting. Yeah, that's it, I guess. Or also this one. Yeah. So these are the things that I have here with me now.
The more this podcast goes on, the more I'm not kidding. The more I'm actually getting interested to maybe start origami myself, like as a daily 20-minute thing. Because it's weird. Because I had interest since I was a kid, but and I even remember tried a bit on from YouTube when I was 14, 15. But like most things it just fell apart, and I didn't never follow through it. But maybe I should again because my passion is getting reignited again. Because actually, the textures you just showed, because the thing that was going through my mind, I was like, wow, if I was an architect or an interior designer, just the pattern and texture would look good in designs. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Exactly. You don't need anything else. You just need a good source of light and then the pattern. And And also the patterns are super simple to be honest. So if you look at it, it's so simple. It's just a square, like lines coming outside of the square meeting other squares. So it is pretty simple. So I have this one also in here. This is not my design,
Wow.
and this is a hypar or hyperbolic paraboloid, if I'm not wrong in calling the name. This is also one of the interesting patterns for architects, and the surface is quite interesting.
This
And
is
if you look
messing with
at
my
it,
brain so bad.
yeah, if you look at it, it is just a concentric hexagons.
Yeah.
So you don't there's no complexity, but the paper folds itself into this shape, which is super interesting. And so if you can fold a crane, if you can fold simple origami, you very likely might be able to do most of the things that I'm showing you in the video.
All right, that's actually a pretty interesting subject which we're going to get into, which is the fundamentals of origami. Because I had a lot of like photographers, artists, visual artists, mostly painters, concept artists, illustrators, which for my audience is kind of like easy to understand what fundamentals are. Perspective, lighting, coloring, but origami is a different beast, which it's gonna be exciting when it comes to, for you to explain the fundamentals to us. But that being said, let's move on to the next question. We'll put that for another time. All right. So the next thing is, of course, you showed us some of your. Now, dear listeners, you might be wondering why there's a jump cut in the editing of the video. Well, internet connections. Well, in countries like Iran, the internet is not as stable as you might think. Well, shocking, I know. Well, we're re-recording the answer to the question I asked, which I'm going to ask again is, how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a design project, like a new origami project or new design you want to make? How does your
Yeah,
pipeline
that's
work
a great
usually?
question. So I usually compare origami to musics, as we have the composer and the performer in the music. It's also the same in the origami. So there are people who fold the designs better than the people who have designed them. And also, there are people who are mostly uh, focused on composing or designing origamis. So I would consider myself as a like intermediate performer and also designer in the origami. And as we have also the improvisation concept in the musics, that's also the same in the origami. My technique, usually what I do is to improvise and play with the paper. And surprisingly, most of my design just have been discovered by accident. And I call them discoveries and not my creations, or also I somehow hesitate to say designs, because I feel that I play with the paper and the design and the form shows itself to me. So hence I'm discovering them in the world of origami in the paper. And the way I do it is that it also happened many times that I was trying to fold a design from other people or even myself, and I got lost during the process. So I was in the middle of a half folded paper, and then I didn't remember how to finish that. So I played with the paper and I ended up in with the new design. So mix and match of every different things, like folding from other people, the patterns and the cliches that you learn during practicing other people's origami, and sheer luck or accidents all play into into the uh, what I came across in my designs. And also I call that being lucky, or I call that playing, but you have to somehow think about the structure that you're playing. So it's not completely random. It's just it's not that you start to fold and play, and all of a sudden the designs emerge. You have to think every step, that what happened with every fold, what happens if you also add this or that. Some might some might work, and most of them might not work. And that's what I call like improvising. See, it also, improvisation is not a random thing. You don't put your fingers onto the on piano playing random notes. It has some kind of an underlying structure. That's what I usually do. So I try to be like, I try to approach the different things, um, um, and then later on, when I see something interesting, I try to converge onto a design and to finish and add the final touches. That's basically what I do. But in the origami world, there are people who uses mathematics, and they calculate the different things. They use even softwares. There are different techniques and equation formulas and science going on into designing origamis, which I'm not very good at. And that's an interesting topic to explore for those who want to search. So, for instance, there's this book from Dr. Robert J. Lang called Secrets of Origami Design, if I'm not mistaken. He explains the mathematics underlying the origami designs. He tried to make it as accessible as possible for even those who do not have a deep knowledge about mathematics. It is thus just like simple. Mostly, it is simple high school and college mathematics if you want to learn about that. And it's I guess around 700, 800 pages of books. That is also one thing, one of the best books that people can read on the topic of designing origamis. But that's just a very narrow field of designing origamis. He also has a book about the tessellations and the patterns, which is again more than 600 pages, I guess. So there's a lot to explore there.
All right, and the next question is actually, it's not a question. There's some stuff I actually wanted to talk to you about. Well, the first thing is, of course, that I want to talk about is Origami Talk podcast, which you started, I think, last year. Tell us about the experience and the story of that. How did it happen? Like, just everything you can
Right.
tell us
So
about.
it dates back even more, even um, back to like 2013, 2012, when I was learning about origami and the origami artist. There was this documentary called Between the Fold. It was recorded on 2009. I guess it's also available online for those who want to check it. It's under an hour. It was showing the origami artists, their life, and also their origami. So it was the first time I was learning about the artist behind the artworks. And it was so fascinating. It was so interesting for me that when I got the chance to travel to Japan to meet um, almost all my origami heroes, I learned about photography, videography, and decided to interview them back in 2014 in the Tokyo University. And because I also could speak Japanese, I had the chance to talk with the Japanese origami artists, which cannot interview in English. So that was also a chance. So the series of the interviews started back in the 2014, but it never got published because I needed a team. I wasn't good in editing. I was too idealistic with choosing the music, so it never see the light, and it never got published. And hours and hours of interviews with the origami artists from 2014 to 2017, because I also traveled two times more after that to Japan, got just stored in my hard drives without being published anywhere, which I still have, which I still somehow regret that. And with the pandemic, with the new reality and the new situation, um, I saw the chance that I could ease off a little bit of that idealism in producing the content. It could be just a friendly chat with the artists. So I contacted the origami artists, some of whom I never even got a chance to meet in person, or at least just we just met really short, but we didn't get the chance to talk with each other. And then with that series, this was I guess one of the first times that nobody was asking the origami artists teach us something about like a model and origami design. And for the first time, it was just completely focused on the origami artists and the designers, and like everyday life, and also the questions about how they got into the origami world, or even simple questions as how do you store your papers? How many papers do you have? Like, where do you keep your origamis? Where do you put your papers? How do you choose the papers? Whatever question that was coming to mind. So it was semi-structured, but it was super flexible. Also, the people, so the platform that I was using was Zoom, so it could host up to 100 people, and people would also be able to ask the artist directly the question. So it was just like again, as I said, it was less about interviewing the artist. It was more about chatting with the artist, as if it was a virtual bar and we were gathered in the same location, and I was just somehow guiding and moderating the whole thing. And that was it, and it blew up off in the origami community. Many people sent me very kind emails, and messages regarding how this origami talk series was interesting. And for the first time, they also had the chance to meet in person with their favorite artists. So this was it started weekly, but then later on it became every 2 weeks, because of the Zoom fatigue that everyone was feeling. And there was like many um, other origami workshops and meetings that was going on, that people felt it was too much to attend all of the sessions, and they wanted to also be with the sessions and meet their artists. So I made it into 2 weeks, and after like 24 sessions, each session 2 hours, it ended. And now I guess it's about 6 months. So in the new year, in 20 the last like in the January 2021, I didn't have any new sessions, and I'm waiting for a chance to also start the second season of the origami talk.
All right, sounds pretty awesome. So it's kind of like I think we both have, based on your story, we both have kind of like the same attitude and a spirit when it comes to learning from other people. Like because I kind of have the same attitude towards my own podcast as well. To like it's basically just fascinating and interesting for me to talk to different creative people and just learn from them. And I was like, I could make it a podcast so other people can learn and enjoy it. So I was like, cool. It could even be good for my resume as well. So hitting like multiple birds with one stone. So it's kind
Exactly,
of like that.
exactly.
And yeah, and another thing that I want to actually point out, that just a suggestion for your works for the Origami Talk podcast, as you said, yes, that was a really good point, that a lot of people don't want to attend so many Zoom fatigues, as you said. So I think if I were in your shoes, I would do this. I would make a Discord server so the talks that you could have the interview format with the artists and origami artists as well, so you could have certain knowledge that you want to extract from them, in terms of interview format. But at the same time, you could say in this month we're gonna have two meetup with this artist on these dates, and yeah, things on Discord. And in Discord, the moderation and everything is so simple and basic. Basically, you can just make a voice channel and mute everyone so they can just listen and not speak. And well, the moderator or the person who's talking, they can just share a screen and talk and explain everything, and the people in the chat could write their questions. Or even better, at the end of the talk, you could just allow, give permission to people to actually use the microphone, like person by person. So there's a lot of creativity you can do with Discord for this stuff, and I think it's kind of like neat idea for your the format of the
Yeah, thank
podcast
you
you're
for the
doing.
suggestions. One problem that I might have with the Discord is that many audience in the origami world are senior people, and they are not used to working with Discord. And Discord is a little bit somehow advanced in terms of interface and the
Oh yeah.
controllers. But still, there are origami people in the community that have the Discord servers, but they're not using that as a video or conference tool. But that might be also interesting. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion.
You're welcome. And the next thing I want to ask you about is your work at Cafe Bazaar Studio. And of course, if you're comfortable talking about this stuff, if I'm not asking too many personal questions, but it's interesting. You said that in your bio on your Instagram that you're a user
Right.
experience designer. And well, it's kind of like, it was kind of like fascinating for me that first, like in the podcast, you said you studied applied mathematics, then you got interested in origami and art. I was like, oh, the correlation makes sense. But how did it happen that you got the position of user experience designer in Coffee Bazaar? Like, how did those worlds
Right.
collide
So
exactly?
that is also one of the things that I was interested from when I was high school. I was trying to design websites when I was like 17, 18 years old, but I never got I talked about coding skills. I learned about CSS, HTML, and a little bit of JavaScript, but I never got to the point to learn it so much to design a whole website with that. So I was understanding how it works, but I wasn't good enough, fluent enough in those uh, code language. And so I never somehow was able to break that glass wall and get over it, because it needed some sort of both coding experience and also designing experience. But later, I came across the not user experience, but first the startup culture with reading the book from Eric Ries. I guess it was like 6 7, because I had this studio origami team, very small team that I was trying to make it into a service, or if possible even a product of origami to make money out of that. So I was reading about the startups and the what was the name of that book? That's a very famous book in the startup world. Eric Ries, Lean Startup. Okay, and I and it fascinated me, and I really liked that. And later on, I went to see video courses from Stanford that was publicly available on their websites. So I was like learning about these stuffs, and as I was moving forward, I realized, okay, there's this user experience that uh, that does this and that, and are somehow aligned with the subjects that I like. So um, at that time, there was this tool that I could design websites without like coding, fully coding. There were these tools that would help you to extract the codes or generate the codes from the designs. So I tried to design websites for myself and for my friend, and also got some projects like commission projects from a dentistry and dental. So a friend suggested me to also send a resume for Cafe Bazaar, and Cafe Bazaar is not a studio in that sense. So it's a software company which has a Android store equivalent to the Google Play, and right now it's like 44 million users, the highest user base in the country that an Iranian application has. And so I sent the resume. I went to the interview process, and I got accepted for the position. And it's been nearly 4 years that I've been in the company, and I've been lucky enough to be around very super smart people and learn a lot, and also do mistakes, and again learn from the mistakes to move forward.
All right. I'm so glad actually I asked that question because it just proves one thing that I've been telling people a lot, that in this day and age, self-study is a complete and viable option to, maybe get your dream job or a job you like, and you don't really have to rely on colleges and institutions anymore. If you All right, I'm just gonna say this: get good at English language. I'm not kidding. There's a way thousands of more opportunities for learning in the internet if you know English. So first focus on that, and then from that you can learn anything. I mean, of course, if you're living in a country like Iran, of course you have to be equipped with like 10 different VPNs and I don't know softwares like that to access the knowledge. But you get the point. Yeah, English is pretty useful. And all right. Now, the next thing I want to actually ask you is that the thing that's actually really interested me as well, the 100-day origami challenge that you did. And the thing is, I personally did a 100-day challenge myself to kickstart my momentum into drawing and getting better at art, like in the summer of 2018. I was actually in a pretty dark times of my life, but like I had the leg broken and everything. I was in an accident. But here's the thing: I mean, I've said this story like I think 10 or 15 times in the podcast. For the recurrent listeners, it's kind of annoying at this point, but to the new listeners, here's how it happened. I always loved drawing and just, being able to express myself visually. I've always been like an artistic, creative kid and person. And aside from that, I've always had like, I still have like really just amazing detailed dreams, and I've always wanted to learn drawing so I could draw them. So here's what I did. I was like, what should I do? I just opened YouTube and just searched how to draw. I know, doesn't seem like the best method, but here's what I did. I wrote how to draw, and a couple of videos popped up. One of them was by the channel called Artoon Block, which is still up, by the way. The video was how to draw Jon Snow. At the time, it was pretty popular, all right? So it was a 10-minute video, and it was like, follow along drawing, and I did it. It didn't look at all like Jon Snow, all right? Let me just be honest. But it was something that I draw, and I couldn't believe that I could draw this, with this structured drawing with some, sense of like, facial features and everything and fundamentals. So it kind of, I was like, wow, I did this. It is possible. So next day I searched another video, 5 6 days passed. I was like, what I did was I put them on the wall of my room, and I was like, it kind of looks nice. I wonder how nice would it look if it was 100 drawings. So I made it a 100-day drawing challenge, and I did it, by the way. And by the way, I didn't limit myself to one medium. I tried oil painting, watercolor, charcoal drawing, everything. I just tried to experiment with as much mediums as I could get my hands on. But in the end, it really improved my art skill, my hand-eye coordination, and everything. And I genuinely believe in the power of challenges and just setting a number for yourself, a high number for yourself, and just grind at it. That is such a powerful tool. And I highly recommend everyone to make a challenge for themselves, regardless of not just art, in anything you want to get good at. And also our guest today did something like that. I mean, I assume he was already super good at origami, but it's still, even this challenge is always bring the best out of you. And well, with that, like this little story out of the way, tell us about the whole 100-day origami challenge. Where did the idea came from, and how did it go? The story of
Yeah,
it,
it
basically.
has been a couple of years. So I guess it was around like 5 years ago, if I'm not wrong, that it started. But what I remember is the last day of the 100 days origami challenge. By the way, 100 it goes faster than you think. People does like 365 days of something, and it even ends quicker than you realize. So 103 3 months and 10 days is it's nothing to compare to many of these challenges, but I would suggest you to try if you haven't ever done anything like that. It ended the day that I joined Cafe Bazaar, so it somehow um, like symbolically marked me putting origami as like a uh, long term career aside and going into a new world, which later on I just came back to origami. I realized that origami is not something that I can graduate from, and it is always tied to my passion and what even defines me. So how it started, my friend Arya, he suggested me to start this, and he was better in the social media, and he said that just like ease off with the idealism in terms of photographing and making the origami. So I was super slow in posting in the Instagram, so he suggested me, and he even um, uh, accompanied me with doing that in his page, but he didn't eventually finish the whole 100 days. And but I kept going on. There were days that I skipped, also especially because I went to Japan to attend the origami convention and the workshops, and also have the workshops. I didn't fully went with the 100, but in the end, like in terms of, so I guess the 100 ended in like 6 months, I guess, in tops. But when it finished, I went to the UX and dedicated most of my time to learning and working in the user experience and user research field. So Arya encouraged me. I started. I learned a lot because, as you said, even by folding the origami models, or even by drawing something that is not super challenging for you, you're still learning because of the discipline, because of the process, because of the constant time you're spending with something, and that helps a lot. And in terms of how to create the like social media posts, what people are interested in your page, what are you interested in folding in choosing an origami model and folding it, and how to document the process of these origamis. So that I would say was also an interesting challenge to start.
All right, and well, let's move on to some different questions. Who are your favorite artists and origami artists and designers that have inspired you the
Yeah,
most?
that's a hard question to ask. I would say every guest that I interviewed in the origami talk was inspiring, so much so that I would be able to say also stories from different people. To name a few, but there are different people for different reasons that I'm really much interested about. I like Hideo Komatsu. Who's a Japanese origami artist and designer. He creates these representative animals. So as I said, I'm not a like professional or super good representative folder. I haven't designed, I guess, anything representative so far, and but his designs are so elegant, and both the process and also the final result is so elegant that it encourages me so much to fold his designs. Specifically, he has a fox design, which has also the like it's super elegant. You have to search for yourself and see the result. It has the curvature, the body of a fox that you wouldn't see in other people's designs. Also, one of my favorite animals and also designs are um, 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 I forgot the name in English. Not the chipmunk, but what was the squirrel? Yeah,
In
it's the
Farsi, could you say
squirrel.
the name?
The squirrel designed by also
Oh,
Hideo
Squirrel.
Komatsu is a super elegant design and one of my favorites. Although the whole process is not 3D, it pops out. The tail becomes 3D, and the body shapes into a 3D at the end. And you can fold it flat and put it inside a notebook, and you can open it up into a 3D shape that sits on top of a table, which is a very, very interesting model. And Chris Palmer, he's also one of my, because he designs these patterns, these geometric patterns and fractal patterns. He has this design, Flower Tower, which is one of my all-time favorite origami designs. That is also one of the artists that comes to my mind. I'm sure many other artists are also missing from this list that I just named too. But I would suggest you to go to Origami Talk, and just because like every artist there has an interesting story and an interesting thing to inspire you.
It's origamitalk.org, and I'll also put the caption of the like the profile's @ caption in. What am I saying? My brain is just freezing. Sorry. I'll put the profile of the Origami Talk Instagram page in the
Yeah.
captions as well. That's what I was trying to say. So for ease of access. All right. So what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kind of project is it? I mean, by working on right now, I mean in terms of any new
Right, right.
origami
So as
project
I
you have
said,
going on,
there's
upcoming.
this exhibition that I'm trying to. It's in 1 month, and I never have like been good at framing my origami, so I've been putting them into boxes and storing them in my room. So in very rare cases, I had like framed them, and this is also an interesting challenge this time with this exhibition to frame these patterns and shadows, which are originally a series that started 5 years ago designing. And currently, I'm trying to choose the best paper, best size, and the best way to frame and um, um, uh, like exhibit these pieces in the gallery. And what we came to agreement with the curators of the exhibition was not to use the classic frames, but rather use blocks of wood that there's a rectangle or square cut out of the center, and you put these pieces of paper in the center of that block of wood, which is like 6 7 centimeters thick. uh, Somehow as a way that this like wood has became into the paper, and that paper became into an origami and the pattern. And that's what I'm working on right now. Beside that, I'm doing also some experiments with the other material, like folding sheets of metal and steel metal and brass metal, and also some even 3D modeling in Blender in order to recreate these origami forms with the wood, which is CNC'd or other or even like used casts. So that's also the experiments and the projects that I'm currently working on. And if you've seen my Instagram recently, I'm also back to this not yet designing, but also experimenting with the pop-ups. So when the pop-up technique, you cut the paper also, and you like take out the form outside of the paper, and that's an also interesting technique that you can explore. And by the way, like last Friday, I had a workshop on the pop-up. So for those who are interested, they can also go to my Instagram and find the address for that 90 minutes origami pop-up workshop, which you can do without any prior knowledge. You just need some cutters, printer to print the patterns, and that's it.
All right. Awesome. And the next question is, what area beside the area you're working on right now, which is of course user experience design and origami, would you be interested to explore and learn in the future if you had enough extra
Right.
time?
I like to learn musics, piano specifically, and coding is one of the things that I'm really interested. I know very basic 3D modeling, but I'd like to also get very better at 3D modeling if that's the case. I would say these are the topics that comes to my mind. Anything, I don't know. I mean, I'm a spontaneous random person, so whatever comes to my interest, I just jump on that and try it a little bit, and then if it grabs me really hard, I keep continuing learning and doing that. But if not, I just leave that, and maybe later on I'll get back to that topic or subject, and then continue that.
All right, awesome. Usually around this time at the end of the podcast, there's a section which I always ask everyone, every guest, which is called timeline section. Basically, I ask them to give a rundown on how someone who's zero at visual arts and anything can get to the level they are, like what steps should they take. But as this episode is a bit special because origamis are kind of like it's pretty straightforward. I'm not saying they're easy. I'm saying just the road to mastery is like pretty straightforward. Start from simple shapes, work your way up to more complex shapes, and as you go, you try you try and study different aspects of the whole science of origami, and that's pretty straightforward in terms of like how to approach it. But but instead, what I want to ask you, which is, of course, it's something that I also ask other guests as well, is the final word section, which is actually pretty interesting. I recently added it to the podcast. Um, Basically, for anyone who's listening right now, and for anyone who might be listening to this podcast in 2 years, 3 years, 2 weeks, like in the future, any point in time in the future, who might sit down and watch this podcast, are interested, and they reach this time stamp at this exact moment. You're looking at them right now. If you could, as you, sir, Mr. Ali Bahmani, if you could say anything, any message to them, any words to them, as a human to human, what would that message or word be?
Right. Yeah, so that makes it a little bit hard when you phrase it or put it in terms of what kind of an advice you have. So because I don't see myself as an expert in giving people like those kind of advices, because I lived like most of my life not listening to other people's advice. And for that matter, I would tell you what worked for me, and it might not work for anybody else, but at least it might be also an interesting thing for others to not follow the general advices or the usual stuff that they might encounter, because I believe that any kind of rule, any kind of path, any kind of best practice in any subject could be broken. Time and time again, I've seen people approaching origami, like professional or non-professional, from a super different angle than what I had imagined. Like they came across origami from a different angle, and for that it gave them an edge, it gave them an upper hand in terms of what they could express with origami, which if it was a usual way or usual path to going into origami, it would have been he would have never been such an interesting artist, because he went a different path than any most of the people who approach origami. He was able to accomplish what other people would accomplish in 10 years in just like 4 years. And seeing all that, it makes it so hard for me to talk about that. And but what I would say is that like in terms of origami, um, I'll focus on where to start. The where to start question about the origami is that wherever you are interested, that's the best place for you to start. And it doesn't matter if you fail, because then you realize this is not the correct spot to start, and there's no right spot to start origami. So that's one thing. And second is that your starting point doesn't matter. Your growth tangent matters. Whether you start from the worst places or better places, if your tangent of growth is not steep or steep enough, you're not in a good shape. So that's what I believe personally. I started many subjects from the most stupid um, starting points, and all of a sudden I was lucky enough to jump onto next stage, and then next stage. And keeping yourself curious and uh, always thirsty for knowing more makes you a better artist or a better designer or better person. Um, that's one thing. Hopefully, long one thing. Second, origami for me is, and hopefully for you might be the same thing, is not about art or complexity or like showing off, which I do. But most importantly, origami for me is to connect with the people. It's the easiest, fastest way to connect with the people. If it wasn't for origami, maybe we wouldn't have this conversation right now. Maybe I wasn't able to do the project of origami talk and travel to Japan, meet many interesting people, and get exposed to their worlds. And for sure, I could also say if it wasn't for origami, I wouldn't end up in my job as a UX designer because of the unique path I went through. The origami journey, it also allowed me to end up becoming as a UX designer in a company. So uh, embrace the randomness, embrace the spontaneity, and just move forward.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for coming by. And what's the best way to contact you if anyone had any question? Is your
Yeah,
Instagram
Instagram
okay
is
if I put
okay.
that in
Yeah,
the
so
description?
that's my usual. Recently, I've been also a little bit active on the Twitter, and the Twitter handle is AB Origami, as for Ali Bahmani Origami. I had an old account uh, which I messed it, and now it's gone. So this is a new account that I opened up and have been pretty active. But yeah, Instagram or whatever contact you have from me, my email is also. But with the email, I'm a bit more slow because I have tons of emails and I check less regularly with the email. So yeah, Instagram would be nice.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming by, and thank you to anyone who's tuned in and listened to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. Hopefully, there's some plans to do some additional content with Mr. Bahmani for origami stuff. If do keep an eye out for that as well. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and stay safe, everyone. See you next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.